Please welcome the legendary Caron.
Well, this is so unexpected to see, what is it, 60 years?
Almost 60 years.
Later, to see all those people coming to see this film.
And they sat with total commitment for 118 minutes. And during the 17-minute ballet, a bomb could have gone off in this theater and they would have sat there continuing to watch it.
Thank you. Thank you.
But was I right? Is this a great movie? Is this fabulous? Fabulous. It holds up so beautifully 60 years later. Really making this film, as I was watching it again, you had two directors, Gene Kelly and Vincent Minnelli.
I did, because Gene felt very responsible for me. And he knew that I knew absolutely nothing about movies. You have a bottle of water, me too. He knew that I did not know anything about movies. I had never acted. I'd never spoken emotion, spoken words. I had just danced in silence. And besides, I couldn't speak English. Wow. So he felt responsible, and he felt he needed to help me. And he was a great pro, and he really did help me.
And now, Vincent Minnelli, is it true, as a director, was not famous for being articulate?
No, I don't know how it happened, because every film you see has absolutely his style, and his imprint is definitely a Vincent Minnelli. You can walk in and know if it's a Minnelli film. But he was not somebody who could express what he wanted. He would pucker his lips and say, "Do it again, Angel." And that's about as far as it went.
But you got something from him.
He gave out an aura of quality. I don't know, you just played a little faster, a little more brilliantly. He just made you, he really had an enormous influence just by his personality being there.
There was something about him that made you do your best, in a way.
Yes. Well, he used to joke that he and I were both prop men. We both cared about the props, because he was very particular about what went on in the background. Was there the wrong color on the bookshelves, or were people too static in the back, or moving too much, or he was very particular about the background, and usually left Gene to direct me.
In the dance, of course, Gene directed you completely.
Yes, Gene is the one who did the choreography, and he would place the camera.
As well.
Oh, sure, absolutely, definitely.
I was telling the audience beforehand that the camera for the dances is always so beautifully placed. It never interferes.
Absolutely, and the choreography was created at the same time. He placed the camera as he was doing the choreography. He had it all in his mind. And he was particularly brilliant at that. I love those diagonals and those semicircles, and all that is very, very clever, very well worked out.
Was the dancing difficult for you? You were ballet trained. Were you trained at all in modern dance or jazz or Charleston?
No. Stravinsky is the most modern I'd ever danced on. And so, but I took to Gershwin like a fish to water. I just adored Gershwin. I love the rhythm, I love composition of the orchestra. I thought it was witty. To me, that's one of the qualities that I like best in some music. It's the wit, the humor, and it was easy. I mean, it's very difficult not to dance to that music.
Leslie was dancing on the side here during the ballet.
Yeah, I can't help it.
Couldn't help but get into the movement,
Oh my God,
the swing of it.
Yeah.
The Charleston and the jazz were all new idioms for you at the time?
Absolutely. Well, Charleston, I think I may have done some Charleston at parties, you know, for fun. But the jazz was definitely very new for me. And I had to learn not to have my arms like this, but like that. And I had to learn to bend my knees. Bend your knees, Leslie, bend your knees. And keep your knees forward, Leslie. Don't keep your knees at the second position. Just, you know, day after day.
Was the ballet for the film different from the ballet you had been doing with Roland Petit Company?
Oh, yeah. Well, he did make me go on toes there, the Toulouse, no, the Douanier Rousseau number with the policeman and so on. But it's very modern. It's not what I used to do.
It's not classical ballet.
Not all that classical, no.
Now, Gene Kelly himself could have been on the ballet stage. Is that true?
I think he would have had to get back to the bar quite a lot. He had gone away from real classical ballet, naturally, and thank God. But he started with some ballet lessons, he told me, to get near the girls.
But what he does is so athletic and vigorous. It doesn't have anything of the classical ballet in him. He disguises it.
Yeah. Much more athletic and modern. At that time, the great influence was also Jack Cole, and who was predominant on Broadway. And his assistant, his main assistant, Caron Haney, was a Jack Cole dancer.
So you were being trained in a new kind of dancing,
Absolutely,
really?
Yes. All I did was imitate Caron Haney.
Now, what about the acting? I mentioned to you before that you play a character who has a secret, and you don't reveal the secret until the end, but you're really playing a subtext before we get there, and you hadn't studied acting. Was this just instinct?
My secret was, what the hell am I doing here? I don't know this profession. And I felt acutely, embarrassed and lonely. This enormous stage, quite cold, you know. I was used to a rake stage with wood planks, which gives when you jump. And I was used to the warmth of the public. You can hear them breathe, you can almost hear them think. And this enormous... Yes? Hello. This enormous stage was at first very, very forbidding. It took me... I felt better on the second film or the third film, but on the first film, what you see there, you think it's very clever, playing... Subtext, no. I was just being embarrassed and trying to manage what I was being told to do.
Were you playing a character who was very close to how you were at that age?
I was trying. There's one or two scenes where I'm supposed to be sophisticated and tell him off, and that made me I was very shy, and to tell Mr. Gene Kelly was very difficult for me. So I tried my best to keep my position, but all I remember from that film is being acutely embarrassed because I didn't know the profession.
But the film opened your first film. It opened at this theater under that sunburst almost 60 years ago, and you were an overnight star. It only happens in the movies, but it happened to you in reality. Was that, you were 19.
Yes.
You say you were very shy.
Oh.
Terribly shy.
Oh, I was really, I spent my time being embarrassed. And all I did was smile because I was so embarrassed. And this room, which I can see now, has large proportions, but it seemed to me, you know, like when you remember your childhood, a place being so immense. I remember an immense place.
For the premiere of this theater, right here.
Yes.
When the film did so well and you became almost overnight world famous, was it difficult to handle psychologically?
No, because I knew nothing of it. I didn't realize. I wasn't reading newspapers. I didn't read the trades. And in Hollywood, I just went to class and, you know, tried to learn English. As soon as the film was finished, I was given an English teacher, and I took ballet lessons and gave ballet lessons. I gave ballet lessons to Michael Kidd at the bottom of the Roosevelt Hotel, I think. There was a dance hall there, and MGM used to put you on layoff, and they were 12 weeks when they didn't pay you. And so I started giving ballet lessons to be paid. And also, they gave me a teacher so that I would start learning English.
And you started to study acting.
Ah, yes. And Betsy Blair, who was Jean's wife, told me, Leslie, you seem to have a knack for acting. You seem to be interested. Would you like to go to my teacher? And I said, oh, wonderful. And it was a Russian teacher called George Danov. And I'm immensely grateful because he taught me that acting was actually a profession. Because there was a sort of superstition in Hollywood that providing you were pretty, you didn't need to learn anything. And in fact, it got in the way. They were very suspicious of New York actors who knew how to act, who were very skillful. And there was a sort of war between New York and Los Angeles. And my teacher thought he was a Stanislavski pupil who had learned in Moscow at the Moscow Arts Theatre School, and he taught me the real method as they taught it in Russia. So that made it much easier for the second film onwards.
Then in your other parts, you knew what a subtext was and you knew how to play it.
Yes, absolutely.
Now you say in your wonderful memoir, I know some of you have bought the book, it's beautifully written, and there'll be some more afterwards out front, that your performance in The Glass Slipper is influenced by Marlon Brando in On the Waterfront.
Yeah, that sounds a bit awkward and stupid, but it's true. I was very, very taken by that performance of Marlon Brando's, and I wasn't the only one. It revolutionized cinema. It revolutionized acting. Suddenly, there was a totally new style of acting, and I must have gone to see On the Waterfront about 15 times, and naturalism and this sort of realistic acting impressed me immensely. And when I was doing Cinderella, I was trying to do just that.
Well, it came through before then. You've all seen Lily, haven't you?
Oh.
If you haven't, you should. Lily, you got your first Academy Award nomination. Beautifully acted, with great depth and truth and conviction in a part that could have been ridiculous if you weren't believing it every minute. We wouldn't have.
That's thanks to my teacher. He was wonderful. For the first month, at least, he would sit there and he would make me stand here and tell me, "You warned me when you're completely concentrated on whatever." And I had to just learn to brush away everything else. And to me, this is the absolute first rule in acting, concentration. And I think all the great actors that we have in the movies today have this one quality.
But you've also mentioned that acting is a lot reacting. You don't always have to say a line.
That's it.
You can just react.
You don't even react, you listen, and you automatically react. And that's part of the concentration. And that's when it's really amusing. You become somebody else. You're not yourself anymore. It's just so amusing.
Now, you became a star. MGM had faith in you. They gave you a variety of parts. Would you say, looking back, that MGM treated you well? I've been saying that all week to Leslie, and you said maybe you're starting to think maybe I'm right.
Yes, I think it's rather very dear of them, because right after doing An American in Paris, I did Man with a Cloak.
Man with a Cloak with Barbara Stanwyck and Joseph Cotton, pretty good co-stars.
Absolutely wonderful. My God, they were good. But I remember Joe Cotton and I was really working hard with my teacher, and I was in a corner getting ready. And Joe Cotton came to me and said, "Oh, darling, what's the matter? You're not feeling well." I said, "No, Joe, I'm getting ready."
He didn't have to do that.
No, he was not at that school. I mean, but he was a great actor, but he didn't have to go through all that preparing, you know.
Now, during your MGM contract, you were loaned out to 20th Century Fox to dance with the other great dancer in movies, Fred Astaire, in Daddy Longlegs.
Oh, yeah. That was good.
What was the difference between them, temperamentally and as dancers?
Well, they had one thing in common. They were both great. Absolutely great. And they both had a fantastic sense of rhythm. And that's a #1 rule in dancing. Fred was of another era, and his dance was inspired by ballroom dancing, whereas Jean was inspired by sports. And I think Fred automatically would not dance with fellas, whereas Jean liked the exchange between boys. You know, it had to do with sports. Fred would only think of dancing with girls.
But Jean loved dancing with kids. Wasn't that I Got Rhythm number amazing?
He loved children.
He loved children.
Absolutely loved.
And I don't recall Fred Astaire dancing with children at all. That's what we think of him dancing with.
You're quite
with
right.
a partner. Yes, with a
You're
partner.
quite right. And in life, he only had one daughter, whereas Jean had many children, several.
Were they both taskmasters and disciplinarians?
Of course. Rehearse, and do it again and again and again until you have it absolutely right. But that was all right with me. I was used to that. In ballet, you simply have to be very rigorous. There were two things that were very difficult dancing in films, 2 or 3. One of them was the cement floors were very hard on the calves and on the thighs. It didn't give. It's very difficult to jump. And also, they had the habit of painting the floors in beautiful, glossy paints that was extremely slippery. And me with my toe shoes, of course the boys had rubber on the bottom of their shoes. I didn't. I had leather, and I would tell Jean, I'm going to fall. And he would say, okay, boys, paint it again with sand this time. And so they would do it again and put sand in the paint.
Your last...
And what else was there? The hours. Oh, no. I wasn't used to keeping toe shoes on for 8 hours. It was very...
Would there be a lot of takes of numbers? You shoot a scene over and over again until it was done to their satisfaction?
Usually a lot of takes, except when we did numbers that we were just two. I remember Fred doing an incredible, I mean, you haven't seen his film tonight, but in Daddy Long Legs, he jumps on a trolley. The trolley slides all the way to the elevator, turns in front of the elevator, and the elevator door opens, and there's an outraged lady who finds this ridiculous middle-aged man sort of swinging on the trolley. And Fox had kept an entire day to do this. Nobody could imagine he could do that in one take. It was quasi-impossible. And he did it in one take. So they came to get me at rehearsal, and first assistant came and said, quick, Leslie, go to makeup and hair. You're going to film. And I said, shoot what? We have nothing rehearsed. And he said, well, you're going to do the montage. And I said, the montage? I haven't learned it. And he said, oh, Mr. Astaire says you can do it. It's all right. And we went, indeed. We went and shot that without ever rehearsing it. He was that good a partner.
So he could just lead you.
Yeah.
Just lead you.
Yeah.
I want to talk a minute about your last great musical at MGM, which was the last great, I think, original movie musical, and that's Gigi. Which, like American in Paris, won the Oscar for Best Picture. Not too many musicals win the Oscar for Best Picture, and it is a masterpiece. It holds up beautifully. Your performance, the little girl at the beginning, you're too old for the part, you fool us, we think you're 14, and then you mature by the end of the film. And you were again directed by Vincent Minnelli.
Oh, yes. Oh, that was absolute bliss doing this film. First of all, I think it's the first MGM musical done on the real location. And Arthur Freed, the producer, took chances because there was the weather, there were airplanes, there was the sound, you know, very chancy for a musical. So we went over there, and indeed it was the rainiest summer that had ever been registered in France. But we managed to have 5 minutes here and 5 minutes there.
But the amazing thing about Gigi is this is fake Paris, and I want to ask you about that in a minute. And Gigi's the real Paris, but they make Gigi, the real Paris, look like a place for song and dance. In other words, it doesn't look that real. They camouflage it enough so that it becomes the background for a musical. Very skillfully done.
Well, I think the choice of sets was fantastic. All those sets do exist in Paris, except for the Palais de Glace. It has disappeared. It's now a theatre. But, of course, the costumes. I don't think anyone pays enough homage to Cecil Beaton and his remarkable costumes. And, of course, the photography, Joe Rottenberg was a great master, sunlight or no sunlight. And when we arrived in Hollywood to do the interiors, I remember the morning when Cecil Beaton came on the set and said, I can't believe all the antiques they have here. They had enormous warehouses of antique furniture from the 13th century onward. They had everything you could dream of. MGM had accumulated all this wealth of beautiful antiques. So our sets were authentic. They really had good furniture.
Now, Gigi was the last of its kind. It was pretty much the end of the Arthur Freed unit. All the musical talent, the contracts were being terminated. People didn't want musicals anymore. And the only kinds that were being made, basically, were adaptations of Broadway successes. Did you feel that there was a difference at MGM between American in Paris and Gigi, that the temperature was different? It was a studio near the end at that point.
As I said, I think the coming on the stage of Elia Kazan and his kind of realistic film, much more dramatic and dour and real, and that new slew of actors, Marlon Brando and Jimmy Dean and Monty Clift, changed the face, and the public was going with that, with the new style of filmmaking, and the artificiality of musicals wasn't popular anymore. Yes, I did feel it, yes.
You did. And of course,
as a matter of fact, I was the first one to want to be part of that dramatic swing. I very much wanted to do that kind of film. I thought, you know, as I said, I'd go almost once a week to see On the Waterfront.
And then you did get to do that kind of film, The L-Shaped Room. And you were Oscar nominated for it. You really were prepared to put away dancing shoes and to be a dramatic actress. You wanted that.
I did very much, and by then I was living in England, and I was really trying to be totally realistic in that part, to the point where I was playing a pregnant woman, and I had taken my own old dressing gown on the set. That's what I was wearing, and I should never forget when Martha Graham, the columnist, came to visit us. Sheila Graham came to visit us, and she was sitting somewhere on the set, and I opened the door of the set to play the scene, and she saw this real 9-month pregnant woman come in, a star of MGM, wearing this 9 months belly was something so shocking to her. I remember her going, oh! You know, she just couldn't recover from...
But that must have delighted you. That was what you wanted.
I was pretty scared. I was scared to, you know, you chance your reputation, because an MGM star just did not appear in films with reality like this. It was considered very shocking. As a matter of fact, they called it the kitchen sink style of filmmaking, and either you won or you lost your career.
And you won.
It worked. Yeah.
It worked.
It worked.
I just want to briefly just cover some of your leading men throughout the years. Maurice Chevalier in Fanny.
Yes, I married him in that film. That was so much fun. Oh God, I love that scene, the way he proposes. It's so wicked. He was wonderful to play with, because he really adored his profession. Took it very seriously. And the give and take between us there is great fun. I had done Gigi with him before.
You don't really have scenes with him in Gigi.
No, I was in the background. No.
But you did tell me, and people will be delighted to hear, interested to hear, that Maurice Chevalier, off stage, was really a very serious, even morose man.
Yeah, he really was. I suppose he was different when he was young, But he'd started very, very young. He'd started, I think you see pictures of him when he was either 9 or 10, and he's this skinny youngster. Maybe he was full of fun then, but he certainly wasn't by the time I worked with him.
Cary Grant, Father Goose.
Ah. Thank you, I agree. I absolutely adore that film, though it didn't win great accolades at the box office. I think the women would never forgive him for not shaving every morning.
In that part.
In that part. He looked like a bum, and he had those white trousers, and you know, he wasn't the Cary Grant they expected, and they wouldn't let him play that sort of part. But what fun it was. But he was very mercurial. Mercurial. He, one minute he was full of fun and telling us stories about his early days. He was a tumbler to begin with, an acrobat. And as a matter of fact, he had scenes where he had to run in the jungle. And there was this man who was way into his 50s, and he runs like a leopard. He's just so beautiful when he runs. It's wonderful. Anyway, one minute he was telling jokes, and one of the stories I treasure is Cary Grant arriving in New York without a penny in his pocket, and all he could do to feed himself was to sell ties out of a suitcase on the sidewalk on Broadway. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine Cary Grant selling ties on... Well, this is what he told us, and that he was keeping a furtive eye on the left and on the right, watching for the heat, as he said. And if the heat was close by, he'd slam the suitcase and run.
Rock Hudson, a very special favorite.
I don't have to, I never got to know the real Rock. He was delightful and very kind, very even-tempered, but you knew he controlled himself. I never got to know the real Rock Hudson. But I know that he was getting awfully tired of the repetition of those same films. I think he was grateful for the renewal of leading ladies. He'd done 3 or 4 with
Doris Day.
Doris Day, thank you. And we had fun doing our film together, but I never got very close to him. Never.
Rudolf Nureyev, Valentino?
Well, that's a great love. I was extremely fond of Nureyev. Now, Nureyev was exactly the opposite. Nureyev was immediately intimate. When you saw him dance, he was completely concerned with his partner. And he was the same in life. He would listen to you and ask you questions and be concerned. And he had this reputation of being very difficult, but I don't think he was. He was somebody who wanted he was a perfectionist, almost more so than anyone else. But he was very respectful of talent, and I simply loved him very much. I know I've got a story to tell about it, but I can't remember what.
Could he have had a career as a film actor? You know, Valentino was not so successful, and he really never got another chance.
Yeah, Valentino was too dramatic, too melodramatic, too theatrical for the mood of the public at that time. And so it wasn't a big success, and he really would have loved to switch directly from from dancing to acting. Oh, and one thing I adored about him is that he had the foulest language of anyone you ever met, in Russian or in English or French. That was delightful. And later on, I played Russian on the stage in On Your Toes, and he taught me all sorts of Russian swear words that I used. Of course, there were no Russians in the audience in those days, so I could, with impunity, I wouldn't do it now. It all had to do with your mother, you know.
Now we're so fond of you in this country, and you're a great star in America, but you've mentioned that in your own country, they have been reluctant to hire you a lot. You appeared in a film with Francois Truffaut.
Yes, and I spoke very good French. But the French were, maybe they thought I was dumb or something. I don't know, the French always thought, she's an American star, she's a musical comedy star. You know, some kind of, maybe some kind of, they didn't dare ask me to be in French films. I don't know.
And that's true to this moment?
Well, something happened earlier in the year. I was asked to play on the stage in a large theatre in Paris called Le Châtelet. I was asked to do Mrs. Armfeld in Little Night Music. And although I was speaking English and singing, if you want to call it that, in English, somehow the French suddenly thought, hey, she's one of ours. And I've started receiving French scripts now.
Oh, good.
So,
and your book will be published in France
in April.
In April.
Yeah.
There are one or two things in the book that I want to mention before we ask for some questions from the audience. I think it's a fascinating story for many reasons. When you chose to do Grand Hotel in German, in Berlin, not knowing German, and having terrible feelings about the language, having grown up in Nazi-occupied Paris. Did you choose to work in Berlin just after the fall of the Berlin Wall in order to get over your prejudice?
Exactly. I wanted to exercise, is that the word? The hatred I had of the German language and of the German people. I still have nightmares all those years later about German soldiers. And in any case, the story takes place in Berlin, so I thought, let's be authentic and do it there. Because they proposed to do it on tour in America, or take over Broadway, or do open in London, or open in Berlin. And I always like a challenge, and so I said I'd do it in Berlin. And I started taking lessons. You know, there are words long like this. Oh, I had to work, I don't know, 6 hours a day for a month before I even got to Berlin for the first rehearsal. And I used to tell my colleagues, now watch it. Don't give me any invented lines, don't improvise, because I don't know another word outside of my script. And I won't know what to answer you. They were wonderful.
Did you get over your prejudice against Germans?
I certainly did. I adored Berlin. I thought Berlin was a very, very lively town. It's true, they still tended to be rigorous about where you have to stand in the bus. You stand there, but not there. You know, and I thought, not sure I like that. But they were very warm and they were very different from. But you know, there were some very nice German soldiers too. There were some poor kids who were being killed and being forced to take up those guns and march. That goose step was something horrible. Up and down Les Champs-Élysées every Sunday. It used to absolutely get me into a rage. And to this day, I don't like anything done like this. I don't like, it goes so far as I don't like the pom-pom girls, because it reminds me of the goose step or something like that. I don't like things done in unison, in a line, kicking and so on. It's too much like the goose step.
Another strong moment in the book, which I think says a lot about you, you were a guest judge at the Moscow Film Festival, I believe, and at one point you said in the book, "I'm not a courageous person," which I don't think is true at all, but you did get up and you said, "I protest."
Yes, I did.
What was that about?
I nearly fainted after that. They were sneaking in a propaganda film against America, and I was outraged. They were showing a hideous, cheap propaganda film. And I suffered too much during the war of the cheap propaganda films that the Germans used to do against the Jews. I would not take it. So after the film, the light came up, I did stand up and yelled, "I protest." And next to me was my translator, and she absolutely froze. She didn't look up, she didn't look at me, nothing. Everybody absolutely froze. And then I sat down, and when the performance was over, I said, "I want to talk to the director of the festival." And I said to him, "If you wanted this to be a political platform, you should have asked me what my opinions were. You haven't. And as a matter of fact, I am pro-American, and I will not stand for using me to back up your political opinions. So either that film goes out or I walk out." Once in a while you have to take a stand, or you cannot live any longer with yourself. So the man said, "Oh, Madame Caron, absolument, c'est vrai, mais oui. We will dismiss this film. This film is dismissed." And then when they were giving the prizes, I noticed it was getting the prize for the best agricultural film. It got a sort of, like the cow that wins the best prize. I thought this was so hilarious. Anyway, it was out of competition from that
Out
moment
of
on.
competition.
And they had this is when there was a Cold War going on full blast, and they had chosen an American film that was already showing America in a bad light, but that's all right. It was Up the Down Staircase, which showed all the flaws of American education. Okay. I mean, they were showing Russian films with the best lights, But, all right, this was a film festival, fair enough.
But then the other that went too far.
Okay, propaganda film is unacceptable. Anyway, from that moment on, I feared not being able to get out. I was ostracized, and my translator, who was in fact my guardian, my spy, you had a spy, you had spies all around you, and she told me she could not get my return flight. And every single day she was made to go to the office, travel office, to ask for my return ticket, and couldn't get it. And finally she got a ticket, and I was put in third class. And I should always remember, I was doing that on the counter because they kept, you know, not taking me in to pass the border, pretending I wasn't there. And she said, don't do that. Stop it. It was that dangerous.
It was that dangerous.
It was that dangerous. I remember walking in the Kremlin on the sidewalk, and then suddenly I stepped down. And she said, don't do that. Because immediately there was a gun at my belly. It was really incredibly oppressive. And I said, I want to see the Dachas, I want to see the real Russia that I've read about in books, in novels. And she had to get a visa to get out of Moscow. And every time we passed a sort of, we would pass soldiers, and the papers were observed, and it was unbelievably oppressive.
And you had experienced that with the Nazi occupation of Paris in your childhood.
Yeah.
On to a happier subject.
Okay.
Well, not so happy, but Leslie played a rape victim on Law and Order, Special Victims Unit, and got a Tony Award for it. Emmy, I keep saying it, you're going to get the Tony next.
Is that for singing?
Yeah. That's for theater.
Oh, for theater.
Yes, we're going to get to that next. Okay. Emmy, how many of you saw that? Speaking of challenging, extraordinary, extraordinary. Neil Baer, who was the executive producer of that, whose son saw Leslie in Gigi on a plane trip, said to him, she's good. Neil is a wonderful casting director, said, I will write a part for that woman. He gets a part for her, she wins the Emmy. It is an extraordinary performance. Neil, are you here?
Neil, thank you. And bravo. Neil has real genius to get great actors, great stars to come. Yeah. He got Jerry Lewis, he got Isabelle Huppert, one of our best French actresses. He got remarkable actresses and actors to come.
Before we ask a few questions from the audience, I see a gentleman here who's in one of the greatest musicals ever made, Mr. Russ Tamblyn, West Side Story. Russ here. He was here. Well, questions? A few questions for Leslie? We have time just for a very few. Yes, I'll repeat them.
I wondered a little bit about the studio system. Did she go to other movie premieres? Did you, other people's movie premieres? Did you
go to other premieres?
Yes.
As a contract player, you had to make a lot of personal appearances, didn't you?
Yes. No, I don't remember that they promoted competitors. I think they were very keen that you should be seen in nightclubs. I don't remember Jack Larson, who is of exactly my era and was in RKO, could remember if we were.
It's okay. I have another question about the women, like Marilyn Monroe, Grace Kelly, all your women. You talked about your men. I wondered what you thought about some of the women.
Well, that's not such a good question at the moment. Okay, well, it's a little off purpose. Other question? Yes, sir.
How it was like to work with Irene Sheriff, the costume
designer. What
was
it like to work with Irene Sheriff,
I think
costume
we have
designer?
a grandson there.
Oh, grandson of Irene Sheriff?
Yes, great aunt. She was my great aunt.
She was your great aunt.
She was wonderful, wonderful, and she came with fabulous hats, absolutely extraordinarily, always dressed to kill. She was very, very, very elegant and original. And, well, she just dreamed up wonderful costumes. She was very inventive. I had no say. the costumes were just superb, and I stood there and they were fitted on me, and that was terrific.
Other questions? People in the back? Is anybody in the back? Yes. Yeah. The woman in the audience loved you in chocolat.
Well, thank you. It's the smallest part in the film. In fact, I was hired to do the part Judi Dench played. Judy had been asked to play that part. She had refused it because her husband was very ill in England. And then they decided to move part of the sets back to England. And she was asked again to do it, and she said yes. So I was out of the part, and my agent said, well, wait a minute, there's another part. No lines, but you get your man. So I did it, and I was thrilled to work with Lasse Hallström, who is a wonderful, wonderful director.
Yes.
I'd like to know if you're still dancing, and if so, which dance forms are you working on, and how long per day?
Are you still dancing? And if so, which forms are you working on, and how long per day? Good question.
Have you calculated how many years ago I did this? Do you really think one can put on toe shoes at 80?
It's in your blood.
No, I walk my dog now. That's as far as I go. I do exercises and I would ballroom dance, but just like many of us dancers, I had a hip replacement, and I know Liza had 2 hip replacements. I did come in waltzing in Little Night Music, which I'm the only actress to have done that, because the others simply went up to it. Okay, but no, I don't dance anymore.
Yes, back there. Yes.
What kind of parts would you be interested to play nowadays?
What kind of parts would you be interested to play nowadays?
I just love dramatic parts and I love comedy. I love both. I have played Fado in America and in Somebody Saw Me and in Australia, and that's terrific fun. I like both. I like acting.
And in short, you are not retired and have no intentions of retiring.
No. I think it's very unhealthy to retire altogether. You should always work.
Yes, sir.
Were you and Sid Charisse ever up for the same parts, or would they kind of write
Yes.
scripts?
Were you and Sid Charisse ever up for the same parts?
Yes, she was meant to do An American in Paris, but she got pregnant.
Wow.
That's what happened.
So they never developed separate projects because you were both the MGM dancing stars. They didn't
Develop separate projects for you? I mean, you're...
Well, once I was in, it was either Sid or me, but she was more womanly, and I played more juvenile. But in that instance, she was meant to be doing An American in Paris. And I wonder what the baby looks like now.
One or two more questions. Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you very much because you're such an inspiration, and I'm sure you inspired a lot of actresses, but I'm a producer, and your films inspired me to produce. So I want to say thank you very
Wonderful.
much. And I want to ask you, are there any directors or actors you would have a passion for working with in the future?
Any directors or actors you would like to work with?
That's,
It's hard to answer.
yeah, I really can't answer that. I'm usually taken by surprise when, I mean, I could have fallen off my chair when I was called to do Mrs. Armfeld. I just never expected anyone would offer that. And there I met the most wonderful director, Lee Blakely, who has done opera in Glyndebourne in England and did a magnificent job in Little Night Music in Paris and would like to do drama. But I'm, grateful whenever. No, I can't say. It's all wrong to plot and plan and say I want to work with this one and that one. Never works.
One more question. One more. Yes?
I was watching this movie, and Oscar Levant is so funny and good in it, and I was just wondering if you had any stories. I just think he's such a wonderful character actor.
Oscar Levant, who was very amusing in this film.
Oh, gosh, yes. Yes. Well, he was mostly a pianist, and he absolutely didn't take himself seriously as an actor.
And that's part of the charm of the performance, though.
Yeah, he couldn't care less. I mean, he was okay, so he didn't mind being there, but he didn't think he was an actor. And he had a great tongue-in-cheek kind of acting. He just had one peculiarity. He hated the word death. And I remember at Gene Kelly's house, on Sunday afternoon, there was always everybody dropped in, and we would play in the backyard. And we were doing murders one afternoon. And there were 1,000 ways of murdering a girl. And finally, Oscar dropped in, and we said, come and murder a few girls. He ran away like this was really dangerous. But he was a dear fellow. He used to say about me, well, she'll never make it. She looks too much like me. And in a way, there is a kind of resemblance.
No, you're beautiful.
Now, this is the last thing. In your wonderful book, you're a little critical about Los Angeles of 60 years ago. What do you think of us now? I think we're a great city.
Indeed, now you've got theaters, you've got museums, and it's built up.
It wasn't 60 years ago.
No. As I noticed yesterday, it was called Westwood Village, and it really was a village. There was nothing more than one floor, and you had to drive hours and hours to find some little center and there were very few supermarkets and very little art, very little art cinemas. And I remember driving one good hour to go to the Los Feliz cinema to see foreign films, and there was one other actor who was there, and that was Marlon Brando.
You were both film buffs.
We loved foreign films, and yeah, we were interested in films.
Now, if I could ask you to allow Leslie to leave the theater, she will be at the desk in the lobby. If you haven't bought her memoir so far, please do so. It is an extraordinary book. Every single word written by her, it has her voice in it. You hear her delightful voice tonight. Hasn't it been a really special time?